Let's get that mic down here. Hey, everybody. Just getting started. A little behind today. My apologies.
First forged weapon from Earth's deepest pain. Grey flint singing of the children chained. Deep in Tartarus where no light shows, while eternal heaven's grip still grows. Mother's wisdom in the blade concealed. Time's first moment waiting to be revealed. In the darkness where the titans wait for the weapon that would seal sky's fate. The blade that split eternal, sacred severed. Heaven's blood sets time free. Through the darkness, feel the cosmos rising. As the blade swings free, let time be. Kronos rising with the sacred blade, while his brothers hold the starry shade. One swing echoing through endless night, scattering stars in eternal flight. From the wound where heaven's blood did fall, rose gold Aphrodite hearing beauty's call. Ocean foam from violent separation, birthing love's first manifestation. The blade that split eternal, heaven's blood sets time free. Feel the cosmos rising, as the blade swings free. Let time be. Now the golden age flows from his throne. Time's first rhythm finally shown. Each titan bearing cosmic power as the moment's birth, each sacred hour. But the blade that splits must also bind, as he swallows what time left behind. Every child down his throat descends, fearing how his own story ends. They thought time could contain them in its golden flow, but new powers rising from the depths below. Every moment revolution, every cycle's call. Watch as time's own kingdom soon must also fall. Through the wound that first made time flow, still the ancient powers come and go. We who live in time's swift stream catch glimpses of the timeless dream. Born of violence, nursed on change through cosmic cycles, vast and strange, till Zeus will break time's rigid reign and set the powers in motion again. The blade that split eternity, sacred separate. Heaven's blood sets time free. Through the darkness, cosmos ever rising, can't contain it. Through time's mystery, let all be. The womb when heaven's blood did fall, rose gold Aphrodite with beauty's call. While Aphrodite.
All right. That's enough of that. Let's get to our... Oh, I don't know why, but I'm having trouble sharing. Just a sec, guys. We're going to be talking about Kronos today, as we did have the premiere last night of the Cronian part of our Orphic Rhapsodic epic. But today we're going to be talking about more of the deep elements, the metaphysics of what this means. Why was time forged in such a way? How is time, the divisiveness of time even, forged from this mythic element of Kronos, his sickle, and the castration of the father? If I could only figure out why that has... Oh, there. Okay, got it. I wasn't quite ready. The song took me forever to make today, or this week, for everything. So, oh, there's my back end. Wrong screen. as you can see, I am a little bit on the frazzled side today. But we'll get through it. We'll get through this. All right, so Kronos. Last night we premiered the Kronos video. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. We've been through quite a few of these already. I did a deep dive on Phanes, on Nyx, on Ouranos, and on Gaia, and now here we are at the Cronian epic, this next part of the tale. Now, this is a really unique point in the cosmological structure of antiquity. It's a very unique point. Even, it doesn't matter if you're talking about the Enuma Elish, if you're talking about the Genesis narrative, if you're talking about how Hesiod portrays it, this point is about as unique as Ouranos' sin, where he shuts the children of Gaia, his first children, up in her womb. This mimics his own sin. This patricide is part justice and part necessary evil, if you will. It is later seen as evil simply because Kronos goes on to take on the characteristics of his father. And that right there is a really interesting element. But in order for the cosmos to be created, in the sense of how antiquity thought of the world, a severance had to occur, some sort of sacred severance, and that is what the primary piece of the Cronian rebellion is meant to illustrate for us. For greater levels of manifestation to occur, we had to have this severance of sky and earth. This disagreement that we saw in the previous deep dives with Gaia, with Ouranos, is already set, and Kronos, the youngest child, and we'll see this happen again, the youngest child will somehow usurp the father. But I think this is unique because in many ways we look at one of the things we talked about in the video is how Genesis takes and the Bible takes a very unique standpoint on who's at fault here in this rebellion. Is it the father? Is it the son? In the case of the Orphic Rhapsodies, in the case of the Enuma Elish out of Babylon, the son is not at fault. The son is on the side of justice. It's only in the biblical narrative where the son becomes the one at fault, the one that is cast out, the one that is cast down. In this case, it's not so much that I think that we are experiencing or looking at a fall from grace or a fall from a divine state, so much as it is a necessary movement for the cosmos to come into being. So where Genesis takes it and flips it on its head and says, you are a fallen creature, you are born of sin, the Orphic and the Orphic Rhapsodies, the Enuma Elish, these things are speaking a very different tune. They're telling us that we have a sacred nature built into us as we are part of this sacred division that occurs. And so we'll just go ahead and get into it instead of just me rambling here. This event is the event where time is created and where also simultaneously love is created. And that's a really, really metaphysically interesting thing, that in order for love, as we experience it, as we understand it, as a feeling associated with relationship, what has to occur is some sort of metaphysical division has to take place. And so before the severance of earth and heaven, before the ordering of the celestial spheres, which is the property of Kronos, there was no relationship necessarily. Everything still is in this kind of primordial soup. The first levels of manifestation have come into being, but they haven't quite yet become ordered. And time is that first level of order, that first level of measurement. And for things to have order, they must be measured. And so before time, we're looking at this state of reality where, and I put this as a paraphrase here, before the heavens, before the earth, before the gods, in the vast fathomless abyss, there was an eternally self-existing power, a silent, invisible, incomprehensible, unfathomable divine essence. And in that, what I'm looking at here, what I'm thinking is we've seen the generation of Phanes being the first visible light, Nyx being the darkness, and the first level of division. From that next level of division, from night, we get the kind of divided, in theory, earth and heaven, earth and sky, but they're still bound together. So they're still one. So we have this idea of them as being sort of separate, but not quite. It's as if the process hasn't completed itself yet. And this event where Kronos severs the sky from the earth is that event. And it's something, interestingly enough, that Nyx, the goddess of prophecy, does foresee. Looks like we have a comment here. To know the meaning of evil to a blade in time, lift the world to hold Kronos, to hold a T-pillar to plain finger. Oh, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Thank you. Thank you for sharing Channel Warhorse. Yeah, so this event divides those spaces, okay? And so I want to go back in time a little bit to share a little bit of where we've been on this journey, because if you're just joining us, this is the first time you've come to the channel, you may not have gone through some of the other deep dives where we talk about the generation of Phanes, of Nyx, of Ouranos, and Gaia. Up to this point, we have seen divisions almost in theory. There is just the theory of division. They haven't quite manifested in matter yet. Matter hasn't separated itself. It's like this big soup. We don't even have the celestial lights. We don't have Helios. We don't have Selene. We don't have the sun or the moon. None of that has occurred yet. For that to occur, first we must have time. And it's funny because time existed in some other way. Kronos before, in the Orphic Rhapsodies, is the measurement of time on an eternal level. But this new version of Kronos, and again, the Orphics, their gods in this metaphysics are like nesting dolls. They're like Russian nesting dolls. Each one is like a new form or a more highly condensed form of a previous iteration. So you see this kind of, from antiquity, kind of like this primal evolution of gods. And from Kronos to Phanes to Ouranos to Kronos again, Kronos spelled slightly differently, is what we look at as the evolution of divinity for them and for their metaphysics. And so this moment is like going back to the original Kronos and almost completing the cycle, completing the cycle of the first level of their metaphysics. And so in this, we basically see the completion of what they called the Aratos Arc, the unspeakable beginning. It's something that can't be spoken about because language is bound in time, relationship, and that cannot occur until time has run its full course, or in the case of our metaphysics here, the severance of heaven from earth. And so in this, the cosmic chaos of the reign of Ouranos and Gaia comes to an end, and measured order is installed upon the cosmos. In fact, this is, you could say, the cosmos's first instance of being is under the reign of Kronos. And that's where we see some really interesting things happen, and we'll get into it a little bit later. But in, like, say, Hesiod, he has the golden age of mankind. If you follow the Orphics kind of allude to it because, you know, they're contemporary with Hesiod. But I don't think they thought of humans as being alive during this time. But Hesiod definitely clearly states there's a golden age of humankind, that the Titans are responsible for the creation of man. Natural cycles had yet to emerge in this time before the severance. There was no cycles of seasons. There was none of our typical time cycles existed. But the Titanic domains were kind of there in theory. We talked about this in Gaia's deep dive, where we talked about how each of the Titans owns a particular, like, kind of like archetype of metaphysical manifestation, how that comes into being. Well, we'll see how they do come into being in this and in future dives, because I do want to spend some time on the Titans because it's super important for the journey that we've been going on. And we'll talk a little bit about the domains that they function in and how they function in pairs, almost like the Ogdoad out of Egypt. But what is it that brings us to this point? Well, it's the suffering of Gaia, this this need to be free from the heavens, from the oppression of the heavens. Under the reign of Ouranos, the suppression of evolution, because Ouranos wanted it to be one way, his way, that the only way, and he wouldn't relinquish to where things needed to go. He created the seeds of his own undoing. Ouranos Hesiod, I believe this is Hesiod here. His refusal to allow his children, the Titans, to emerge from Gaia's womb symbolizes stagnation, imbalance that prevents the cosmic order, necessitating a revolutionary shift to restore balance and justice. His account of that tyrannical rule, he basically states that it is the first evil of the cosmos. His unwillingness to relinquish power, his unwillingness to allow things to progress as they will outside of his purview, is what generates this moment, this need. And Gaia's sacred rebellion against that does just that. It's not just Gaia, though. There's some other pieces to this puzzle that we'll uncover. So she crafts the blade. We've talked about that. There's this spark of necessity that I want to touch on, and that really is the sin. So we find this this non-virtuous action of Ouranos as also a metaphysical element. It's not just a he did bad, but this was a thing that needed to occur. Instead of reframing it how the Bible does as an event that is looked upon in bad light, in bad lighting, or bad character, it was something that must occur in order for manifested reality to come into being. All of these characters are playing a part, telling us the story of how they saw the world come into being. And so I think it's really interesting. We see this cosmic drama, but on the underside, the underbelly of all of this really is how they saw the world from a scientific perspective, at least from what they believed. The sickle is the first element of crafting. So we can see some of her children have this element, like the Cyclopes. They are craftsmen. They are that first archetypal element of taking matter and shaping it into something. But you see it again in Gaia. She is the first craftsperson, the first one to make something of matter, not only of her own body, but the sickle, the first tool, if you will. And so we see time as the first instance of differentiation in the cosmos, and each of the Titans will have their own element that kind of forges the reality that will be built out in both the Titanic Age, the Olympian Age, and then everything else that follows for them. But before we get there, I want to talk about Nyx and her element of prophecy and the necessity of time. So we go back a couple of deep dives, a couple of videos to Nyx, and I've talked about this before. Behind the scenes, Nyx is the one running everything for the Orphics, all the way down to the end of the Orphic Theogonies. Nyx is behind the scenes pulling the strings. She's foreseen this in her cave of prophecy. She's seen everything that's going to occur. And you can see her touching each piece, each succession, in a very, very, what's the word for it? Subtle. It's a very subtle thing. You see her just pop up occasionally. Like in the reign of Ouranos, you see her just once. You see her talking to Kronos. She is apparently very fond of Kronos. He is her favorite of the grandchildren. And in this, it says here, and this is from the Rhapsodies, of all these mighty sons and daughters of Earth, it was Kronos who Nyx cherished and cultivated. Cultivated. That's really interesting. Cultivated is an interesting term here because, as we know, Kronos is going to later be associated with agriculture. And so that term is not by accident. That's clearly on purpose. That is what they wanted us to know, was that she already foresaw everything that was going to occur here, and she's gently prodding it along as we go through this. But the reason isn't just because it has to happen. I think there's also some elements here that are very interesting about Nyx, her character, and what we know of night in general from their perspective. So there's this great paradox going on. And I just wrote a little bit here. Pure eternity presents a metaphysical paradox. Without measure, there can be no manifestation. Without division, there can be no relation. Without time, there can be no becoming. And without succession, there can be no evolution. For all of this to happen, everything from me sitting here on the internet talking to you on this live stream, sharing this information with you, something had to occur. In the time before time, none of this is possible. It's just an idea. Call it an idea in the mind of God. That is kind of how the Orphics saw a lot of this. Until you have Kronos, everything is kind of just this big idea soup. In kind of greater and greater senses of differentiation, because you have light and darkness, you have earth and sky, you have some primary divisions, but they haven't yet come into full fruition. With Kronos, you see an explosion of division. During his reign, you have all of the different titans. You have all of these different giants, all of these different primordial beasts, if you will, in that time, in that mythology. So there is an explosion of manifestation after Kronos' sacred severance, which is really fascinating if you think about it. Before that, everything else that we see is primordial, non-divided. So for the cosmos itself to be born, and for creation to be fulfilled, for order to arise from that chaos of that undifferentiated soup, if you will, one must have measure. And the primary measurement is time. That's why time has to be born. Eternity can't manifest possibility. Possibility just rests in eternity. It doesn't have motion. It doesn't have action. It doesn't have the metaphysical properties possible for the full expression, if you will, for the full expression of this. So division creates the space for the becoming, the separation enables the relationship, and that distance between items, between things, between beings is what makes love possible. Because love, in its base form, is a longing to return to unity. It's a longing to be close with something else. It's a longing to look past our perception of separation and to see that unity again. And so it's really interesting. Ouranos, his suppression of his children, leads to the seeds of his own undoing in Kronos. And Kronos' action in the severance of heaven, this bloody action of violence and division, is born the seeds of our return to unity in Aphrodite, in the goddess of the sea foam. That's some really high level metaphysics from people who we look down upon from our modern perch, and see that most people, I would gather now, that's a really difficult paradox. How can love be born of such a terrible violence? But it is, because it's a necessity, metaphysically speaking. It has to occur for the other part to happen as well. So they're intrinsically linked in a paradox. So who are these conspirators? Well, these are the children of necessity. These are the children of what needs to come into being. Kronos, the lord of time. Coeus, the titan of inquiry, of wanting to know what the other is. Demis, the titaness of justice. Hyperion, the titan of light, and his consort, the titaness of sight in Theia. Creus, the titan of the stars. Now you hear some stuff about the stars, if you will, in Nyx and in her reign, but it's in Creus, the grandfather of all the starry gods that we come after, that we really get this idea of the stars as being separate, right? The stars are embedded in Nyx, they're embedded in Ouranos, because Ouranos is the heavens, Nyx is the sky, but they've not yet come into being. And through Creus, they will come into greater and greater condensations, if you will. Many of Creus's children will take greater form into the cosmic order that we see unfolding here. Iapetus, really interesting character as well, the Titan of mortality. Now, you can't have mortality unless you have time. You can't have any of these come into their full expression, their full manifestation, until the moment that time is created. And so all of his sisters and brothers are there, and they're participants in the severance of Ouranos' phallus when Kronos cuts it off, and the blood splatters everywhere onto the earth, creating all manner of things, from Aphrodite with the sea foam that mixes with with Ouranos' generative properties, and also his blood hitting the sacred earth. It is said, and I think I put it in here, but I'll try and paraphrase, that Gaia received his blood in her womb, and from that she forges more giants. So the giants that have been locked up, she's hoping to get them released because she's mournful of the process. In some cases, it seems like it's painful for her, not only emotionally but like physically, having these cosmic forces bound within her body. She's hoping to get them released. She's going to bear more giants. She's going to be more of a problem in the future. It's the nature of Gaia and her cosmic justice. But all of these things can't happen until time is born. So let's get to the deed itself. This pivotal act where Kronos' castration of his father Ouranos is recounted across multiple traditions in antiquity. This graphic and cosmic implication are central to the birth of temporality and the establishment of the Titanic reign. As the Orphic Rhapsodies state, the Titans overtook and bound him while Kronos cut off his genitals. The members of Ouranos flew into the air into the wine-dark sea and swirled about in the restless blue waters, forming a wondrous foam out of which emerged beautiful and heavenly Aphrodite Urania. You can see the echo there, Ouranos, Urania. So from his generative power, Aphrodite is born. Now and they go on to say she's the mother of harmony, and she was born, and she was caretaken by zeal and deception. What's really interesting about this is it's not only the deposing of Kronos, or of Ouranos, that happens when Kronos cuts off his genitals, but this unforeseen creation. This unforeseen creation of Aphrodite. Nobody could have guessed that unless you're Nyx. And that's what's really interesting here, is that for the Orphics, Aphrodite is Nyx. Cytherea, Cybele, these are all just names of Nyx. So if Nyx hadn't been created and manifest, let's imagine that for a second these are levels of hierarchy that, metaphysically speaking, feigns the Lord of visibility is in the first heaven, and then you have in a second heaven you have the reign of Nyx, and she's there in archetypal form, and then you have the reign of Ouranos and Gaia, and they have yet to take manifested form. It is in this moment of severance that gives birth not only to time but to love and to longing, and that is how the Orphics saw Nyx. That is exactly how they saw her. She is that longing. That's why we have that moment when we look at the sky at nighttime and we see the stars speckled in the deep, dark night, and we have this sacred feeling, this sacred longing for something. That is how the Greeks, how the Orphics in antiquity saw love. They saw it as this deep spiritual longing to return. And what we see in this moment of Aphrodite being born is Nyx coming into a more condensed, more material form. Not as some deep, dark mistress of some archetypal form, but as a new form, a new condensation of that archetype. So we have a cosmic rift. We have the separation of heaven and earth. We have the firmament being created in Genesis. The separation is now taking place within matter. Primordial chaos is kind of shoved into the back burner, and we see the first stages of cosmic order come about through the Titans and their very primal form of what order is. And now we'll see after them, after the reign of the Titans, we see even greater and greater levels of order, of structure, of beauty, really, with the Olympians. And we see again this idea of succession, of generational upheaval, of how within generation to generation, this cycle of chaos and order just kind of churning through, and through that cycle, greater and greater stages of evolution. And of course, we have, yes, shattered harmony. Sometimes when I'm making these slides, I swear I'm like, why did I even put that in? I know I'm just going to riff off of what's on here anyways, so I I think I just fill in stuff in case I lose my talking points. So with the castration of Ouranos, Kronos emerges as the new cosmic king, assuming the mantle of supreme authority of the heavens and the earth, and he's hailed as a savior, as a soteria, as they would say. So he ushers in a new era of stability, of order, establishing the foundations of temporal reality. And Virgil talks about this in his I forget, it's one of the plays. One of the plays. He gathered together the unruly race of fauns and nymphs and scattered over the mountain heights and gave them laws. Under his reign were the golden ages of men tell of. In such perfect peace he ruled the nations. So here's again this idea that in this time there were humans living under the reign of Kronos, which is really intriguing. The Orphics, they don't go there. I think they treat the Titanic Age as something pre-human, as a building block of what we will later become. Looks like we got a couple of comments here. This is how the cosmic clock is established, the celestial bestiary. Yes, it's the division of everything, and the Titans are all responsible for a lot of the zodiac, as you kind of see. This is the Greeks' version of what they learned from the Egyptians, because the Egyptians already had this laid out, and this is just the Greekified version, if you will. In this golden age, though, we're talking about a pastoral utopia, men living to ages far longer than our own, which we see mimicked again in Genesis. Men living hundreds of years. There's this sort of harmony that is echoed in the harmony of the Garden of Eden. There's a mythic innocence with humanity. We are not yet privy to the fall because that has not occurred yet. If we're looking at the reign of Kronos, this is concurrent with the fourth day of creation. The fourth day of creation in the Bible. And in the Bible, in Genesis, it's very clinical. It's precise. It's on the fourth day, the creations of the heavens, essentially. The sun and the moon, the lights in the sky. Like that's the general gist of the fourth day of creation, and then they just move on to animals and birds and things like that in the next day. What we see within this, if we're looking at this day by day, reign by reign, which you can map them side by side, the Orphic reigns of each king and the biblical days of creation. We're now in the fourth day of creation. We've already explored the first, second, third. We're now in the fourth day of creation, and it is the time of the Titans, of the celestial ordering of things, as Jalea Jalu said in the comments here. So good on you, good on you. It's a land of eternal spring. This is before the great flood, before the flood of Deucalion, before the flood in the Bible, before the flood in the Enuma Elish, or the Atrahasis epic, which is after the creation epic. But what I want to go to now is let's talk a little bit about the Orphic hymns themselves. So I've got some new translations here that I did recently of both Kronos and Aphrodite, because that's what this time is all about. And so I'll read them to you, and we'll see what we can pick out of them. Ever-blooming one, father of blessed gods and mortal men, many-counseled, unstained, mighty in strength, valiant Titan, who consumes all things and increases them again in turn. You who hold unbreakable bonds throughout the boundless cosmos. Ageless Kronos, all-begetting one, Kronos of manifold wisdom, offspring of earth and starry heaven above, birth, growth, decline. Husband of Rhea, revered Prometheus, you who dwell in every region of the cosmos, source of generations, curve-counseled one, most excellent, hearing our suppliant voice, send us prosperous completion of life, forever blameless. Now, there's some interesting pieces in here, and there's other translations, and I recommend you get your hands on a lot of them, especially. I really like Patrick Dunn's book on the Orphic hymns. But there's a lot of cyclical imagery here, and there's a lot that we can pick out about what this time was like, or what they were trying to describe to us in these texts. Ageless one, all begetting. So it's almost as though all of the instances before lived within the archetypal mind of, the divine, God, if you will, whatever you want to talk about. This is almost like the first instance of a demiurge proper, as we would think of it in kind of the mind of Neoplatonism or late antiquity in general. It's like the proto-demiurge. As we know later, it will later be Zeus, who recreates the universe. So the instance here, at least for the Orphics, is that there was a universe before this one. You see this in other mysteries too. The Hopi have 4 different worlds in Native American. The idea of multiple worlds, or multiverses, if you will, is not exactly uncommon. But this is the first instance of what we might consider a demiurge. In the creation of the cosmos. I do think it's really interesting here in this, and Prometheus. If we're looking at Orphism as the gods being Russian nesting dolls, Prometheus comes from another one of the Titans. So the only thing that I'm getting here is not that he's genealogically associated with Prometheus, as much as Prometheus is known as the creator of humanity. And so if Kronos is the lord of this age, then he is somewhat Promethean in the creation of humanity as a whole. Considering how they kind of looked at us as having a titanic nature, where the Orphics saw us as half Titan, half Olympian, then he would be the father of our Titanic side. But also, so it's kind of part of him. Julia says, next generation Zeus and the Olympians. Lord Zeus, sin of the cuneiform. Yep, literal bottom of the barrel. However, Zeus managed to get under Sirius and get a little law and order. Yeah, I mean, Kronos, he had to be supplanted too, just like his father. It was foreseen, it was prophesied, it's stated in multiple points in both 3 traditions that there was this cosmic if you will. I'm not even going to use the word sin. It's like a cosmic oops that had to be rectified. And Zeus is the last one to do it. He has his own oopsies, but he does end up fixing it, according to the Orphics at the very least. So this is this latest one. I'll post this on my Substack. You guys see the link of that in the channel description. You'll find the Substack, but I'm going to post a couple of these as I go through them and translate them. But just a couple of interesting things to look at there. I think it's when we're trying to get an idea of the character of these deities, of these divine or cosmic forces, these hymns, they never stop giving. So what does it really reveal? As father of gods and men, Kronos emerges as a cosmic force of perpetual transformation, of the cosmic churn, of this cyclical nature of everything, that through these cycles we get greater and greater density, not necessarily even density as much as greater and greater refinement of divine and matter as an amalgam. So often Saturn, Kronos, is involved in binding and releasing. We see that in magical traditions, especially all throughout Europe, even into Egypt. This speaks to his his ability to create boundaries. So it's going back to the idea of him being the Lord of Time, the ultimate binding tool, time. The reference to his dwelling in every region of the cosmos speaks to his all-pervasive nature, while the curve counseled evokes his legendary cunning. The imagery moves through cycles of creation and dissolution, mirroring Kronos' role as the Lord of Time and change, and each line seems to have this kind of cyclical nature to it when you read it. I would encourage you reading them a few times, and you start to get a feel for it. The rhythmic structure echoes the eternal cycles. So these poems, the Orphic hymns, they're not just like somebody wrote down a poem. They are mathematically precise. If you apply Pythagorean isopsephy onto them, you'll see that they have very precise meter. They have a very precise way of showing up. And so that's if you know any Greek, which I'm learning, but it's a very slow process. It makes me feel rather childish, if you will, trying to understand their language. But the way that the Orphics presented this is very, very precise, down to the rhythm of each of these. Each one is a little bit different. So, of course, time's function. We get the cycles, we get governance, measurement, we get chronology, we get the succession of generations, and we get the cosmic ordering of things. We get this kind of a sacred dance within that. It's the beginning of the synchronization of different realms. So let's talk a little bit about the Titans, what their deal is. So we've got Kronos and Rhea as a pair. So we have the king, the ruler of the cosmos, the orderer, the lord of time, and we have another goddess figure of fertility, of matter. Rhea is like another more refined version of Gaia. So she is often associated with grain, often associated with the earth itself. She's the keeper of that cosmic rhythm, and she's got that queenly aspect to her. So we see king and queen, just like we see in Ouranos and Gaia, but a little bit more refined. Then we get a splitting off, where it was once just Gaia and Ouranos. Now we have an explosion of pairs. Oceanus and Tethys, I think, are echoes to Apsu and Tiamat, because they are basically the mixing of waters. Oceanus being the river of fresh water, and kind of this chthonic god who is a guardian of the underworld as well. And then you have the sea goddess of Tethys, who is the other, right? So Apsu, Tiamat, these are fresh and saltwater deities. You see that echoed here in the Greek. And then we move on to, because they're not necessarily always included. Like Hesiod kind of has them sometimes preceding the Titans or being primordial. And the Orphics, they actually include them in the birth of the rest of the Titans. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and pull it up because I forget the actual order. They present a specific order in which they are born, which I think is indicative of their metaphysics and how they saw the universe coming together. So the daughters are born first in the Orphic, and the sons born second. So, yes, Themis is the lawgiver. She's born first, followed by Tethys, the sea, followed by Mnemosyne, memory, who's the mother of the muses, followed by Theia, the mother of light or of sight. Then they've got another Titan that's not necessarily listed in Hesiod, of Dione, who is later considered just to be like a female version of Zeus. The mother of procreation is how the Orphics see her. Then we have Phoebe, who is the goddess of prophecy. And then we have Rhea being the last of them, of the seven. Hesiod, I think, stops at 6 for most of them because he puts Oceanus and Tethys before, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong. Call me out if I am. But then you go to the sons, and again, they're born in a specific order for one reason or another. We have Koios, the lord of inquiry, Krios, the lord of the constellations, and then we have like another one that's out of nowhere, Phorcys, who rules the great depths of the sea. Then they move on to Hyperion, then to Iapetus, who is the father of mortality, then to Oceanus, and then to Kronos. So they differ slightly from Hesiod. They differ in general, but you can pair them up, and they serve specific functions. Hyperion, the Lord of Light, must be met with a goddess of sight. So where he emits light, she receives it, right? So she is the kind of, let's just call it the prototype of an eye. So she's all-seeing. And you see this a lot with the Titanesses in general. They're receptive, whereas the males, the Titans, they're projective. They are projecting something out into the cosmos, and the Titans are receiving it. We see in Coeus, we have inquiry. This idea of I'm seeking, it's an intelligence. He also represents the axis of heaven itself. And so in his inverted property of the feminine part is the prophecy of Phoebe. She's the goddess of intellect, and she is the receiver of that intellect. So he's projecting out that intellect into the cosmos. She is receiving it. Creus, just the same. We have the Titan of heavenly constellation, or as we can kind of look at this as the authority. The stars dictate everything from that point down. So the stars, the zodiac, and if we look at the metaphysics of their world, the way that they saw things, the stars and the zodiac dictate what the planets are going to do. And as, let's just call it energy or life, filters down through these layers of reality, from the zodiac to the planetary spheres and beyond, the stars are dictating what's going on. On the opposite side of it, if the stars are dictating what is to happen, if let's say we read the stars for prophecy, that means they are dictating in somewhat an authority for us. Well, who receives that? Well, it's Themis, the goddess of law. She receives that tradition and displays it for us. And in the same way, we have this final pair here, Iapetus of mortality, of lifespan. And with that, the other talking point is Mnemosyne of memory. We have to have some sort of sacred memory if we are going to be going through cycles of time and not bearing the faculty of eternity. Then memory becomes quite important. And so that is a little bit more of a clunky dynamic, and we could talk about that for ages, about how mortality and memory go hand in hand. But I won't keep us there for too long, because we're at about 47 minutes for this one. What we begin to see here, really, if you start to map it out, is I have a notebook here that has a few of them listed out as if we were going to put them on the Tree of Life in the Kabbalah. But there's just enough of them to show the structure of reality starting to come forth. And from each one of them, we see higher and higher forms of their basic constitution, their character, if you will. Hyperion, Lord of Light, with Themis, Theia, goddess of sight. They bear Helios and Selene, which are basically what we know as the physical sun and the physical moon. And then after that, once we have those, then we see greater and greater forms of the sun and the moon in the Olympian order with Artemis and Apollo. Essentially what we see is the trickling down of these forces. But I want to go back to love. We've talked about time, but why was it necessary for love to be born at this time as well? Love requires distance to exist. From that very violent moment that created space and time arose a living bridge, if you will, to the space before. So in that act, we not only were given time, measure, manifested reality, but the key to perhaps transcending it or understanding our nature, understanding where we come from. Beautiful heavenly Aphrodite, the mother of harmony, as she was born, zeal and deception took her into their care. Those are interesting pieces that we'll talk about later. But what I want to get to is that time, even though they're kind of paradoxically opposed here, does not oppose love. It is the bedrock, the substrate, if you will, to make love possible for us in manifested reality. In creating that distance, time creates the longing, that we experience and drives us towards creating change. Time creates the growth, it creates the impetus for evolution, and in creating loss felt from division, we create appreciation for other and for the uniqueness of other, as well as the understanding that other is just another form of me. But when we look at what the epithets are for Aphrodite, we have Urania, right? Heavenly, divine. We have Machanitis, the deviser, the contriver. This, I think, speaks to her connection to Nyx as a prophetic character, because you see Nyx behind the scenes planting the seed of distrust in Ouranos. Also, she does it with Kronos. And then Malinus, Black of Night, is another one of the epithets that suggests that even though it was primarily, I think, the Orphics that saw Aphrodite as Nyx, it seems to have seeped into other tales as well. And so I will share with you here yet another translation that we have here of the Orphic hymn to Aphrodite. Heavenly one, many-named, laughter-loving Aphrodite, sea-born goddess, life-bearer, lover of night's mysteries, revered one, nocturnal yoker of souls, weaver of cunning, and mother of necessity. Mother of necessity is a callback to even before Nyx to Ananke, who we see in the Orphic Rhapsodies before, the force of necessity. For all things spring from you who have yoked the cosmos itself. So if we understand how Nyx functions in the Orphic metaphysics, she is the web of everything. And holds sway over the triple fates. So again, we have a link to prophecy here. Bringing forth all things that exist in heaven and the fruit-abundant earth. And in the ocean's depths, O honored companion of Bacchus, delighting in feasts, rejoicing in marriage rites, mother of loves, finding joy in beds, secret one, bestower of grace, visible yet invisible. I think that's a callback to Phanes. Beautifully tressed and nobly born, bridal companion of gods, scepter bearer and she-wolf. The scepter bearer is really important because I think that's a callback to the scepter of Erechopaios that is passed down from each of these. What's interesting is from here on out, you don't see Aphrodite as someone in Hesiod who's of import. You don't see her in most of the myths as somebody who is cosmically important. Everything kind of switches over to Zeus, and Aphrodite is just a daughter of Zeus in much of Hesiod. And so what we see is a very different picture in the Orphic cosmogony. She is someone who's born outside of that. If you think about it, she comes from the generative power. She is the generative power of heaven. So Ouranos loses that power in that moment, and Kronos takes over the kingship. But where did the power that Ouranos have go? Well, it is bestowed in Aphrodite, which is very intriguing. How is it that we have this goddess who seems to be just like on the outskirts of most of the mythology, just and viewed in modern parlance as just the goddess of love? Just like to me, that's just pure hilarity. Giver of birth, lover of men, most desired one, life-giver, and you who have yoked mortals with unbridled necessities, and the many tribes of beasts mad with love through your charms, come, Cyprus-born, one of divine lineage, whether on Olympus you dwell, divine queen, rejoicing in your beautiful countenance, or if you tend the shrine of fragrant Syria, or if in the plains with golden-wrought chariots you possess the fertile bathing places of sacred Egypt, or if on swan-drawn cars over the ocean's swell you come rejoicing in the circular dances of sea beasts, or if you delight with dark-eyed nymphs on divine earth, dancing upon the sandy shores with light step, or if in Cyprus, queen, where lovely maidens and nymphs throughout the years eternally hymn to you, blessed one, and pure Adonis too, come, blessed goddess, with gracious visage appearing, for I summon you with holy and reverent words. Another very interesting point is how long the Orphic hymn to Aphrodite is. When you compare it to most of the other ones, they are just short. The Kronos one is just like this little chunk of text. Yet Aphrodite gets 2 pages, it feels like, of all of these things, which means to them there is a lineage of nobility that that needs to be recognized. And I think that in this moment, in this severance of the generative power of Ouranos, was born not only the ticket of descent, if you will, for the soul. What we are seeing in this myth is that it is encoded the descent into matter, and then the way to ascend out of matter is through love. So through our descent was also born our method of ascent, and that is through Aphrodite and the longing to return to unity above. But where does this leave us? in this great cosmic drama, the fear of succession continues. Kronos starts to become paranoid, and he starts swallowing his children, which will come into play eventually here. What is this weird act of swallowing things? Why is that so prevalent in the myths? What is this idea of just swallowing people that tends to happen? But he does. He starts. But we have already put in motion the cycles and the seasons. The idea of kingship, the idea of a rhythmic motion, the cycle of progression has already begun. And time and eternity begin their own dance. Just as chaos and order do, time and eternity move in this cyclical nature. And what we get from that is the first inklings of the human condition. We are bound by time. We're subjects to death. We live in a material existence. We have this interesting tapestry of life, these moments that then get bound up into a final piece that show us who we are. And then we, of course, have the process of generation that follows. Because we are of that Titanic nature, we too follow this cycle of succession. And that succession will to Zeus, who will be the... I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a little detour to about Rhea, what this age of Kronos, and before we get to Zeus, to explore quite a bit more growing resistance to oppressive fathers who try to dictate the course of evolution. What will happen is, of course, as Kronos starts to swallow his children, Rhea moves, under Gaia's pretenses, really, to save the last son, to basically trick Kronos into eating a stone and putting Zeus in a cave somewhere. Now, this is really interesting imagery because what do we know about caves? They're the domain of Nyx. And so Zeus is going to be tutored by Nyx, if you will. And that leaves us with, I'm running out of ideas here, but it's really a metaphysical legacy that we're looking at. And Kronos symbolizes, I think, so much more than just temporal reality. I mean, we could go on and on about Kronos, agricultural god. We've got all the symbolism of the scythe, the eating of their own children. We talked about that a little bit. He is, just like time, he consumes everything. And in his deposing, he's not cast aside like Ouranos. He maintains a sense of of much import after Zeus takes hold of the cosmos. Kronos isn't banished. He's given a place of importance as the guardian of the Elysian fields, of basically the afterlife for heroic people outside of the underworld. So he has a heavenly aspect as well as a chthonic aspect, and he's, like I said, there's so much that can be said about it. But before I let you go, I'll give you guys some time to ask some questions in the chat. Let's see what we got going on here. We got Channel Warhorse and Jalea Jalu talking to each other. I'm gonna have to go back and read your guys' you guys' comments. Thanks for being so active in here today, guys. It's good to see some activity in the chat. Yeah, Kronos is the architect of the mainframe. Yeah, you could say that. The architect of reality, really. Most of what Zeus does in following his father's footsteps is slightly rebuild certain aspects, but it's all built on the same template. Whatever Kronos lays down in that foundation, in that framework, is then redeployed by Zeus when he recreates the universe. The Titans, however, are bound in Tartarus, which is really interesting. Certain Titans, not all of them. But we'll get there. There's some ideas that I have about what it is that they're really talking about. How many Titans are bound in Tartarus? It's up in the air. We don't really know. What was the reason for their binding? Because it's not like any of the specific ones that are thrown in Tartarus did anything in particular in the war between the Titans and the Olympians. So there's no like obvious reason that any of them would be thrown into Tartarus. Some of them that help Zeus are not thrown into Tartarus, but then there are some that are involved that aren't. Like, all of the Titanesses are not thrown into Tartarus. It's just the males. So I think there's something interesting there. Whether or not that's something associated with the male instinct to oppress in general that Zeus was trying to get rid of. Sarah Waters says, all was inspired by one mind. Absolutely. I mean, and if we look at Kronos as the first instance of that mind coalescing, it would be Kronos looking back at all of the archetypes of time beforehand, right? So he's looking back at everything that existed in archetypal form and bringing it forward, projecting it then into his wife, Rhea, into that matter, right? So his intellect of seeing the archetypes is then projected into the receiving of Rhea, and Rhea then brings it forth into matter and manifestation. All right, guys. I'm going to go ahead and play our song for the day again, but I wanted to thank you guys all for joining me here, and anybody who watches afterwards, watches the live replay, give us some love. Give us some comments, some likes. Let me know what you liked. Sorry, it's a little scattered today. There's a lot to go through, and this week has just been kind of wild. So appreciate you sticking with me through it. As is customary, I'll play the song of the day again.
First forged weapon from Earth's deepest pain. Great flint singing of the children chained. Deep in Tartarus where no light shows, while eternal heaven's grip still grows. Mother's wisdom in the blade concealed. Time's first moment waiting to be revealed. In the darkness where the Titans wait for the weapon that would seal sky's fate. The blade that split eternal, sacred severance. Heaven's blood sets time free. Through the darkness, feel the cosmos rising. Let time be. Kronos rising with the sacred blade, while his brothers hold the starry shade. One swing echoing through endless night, scattering stars in eternal flight. From the wound where heaven's blood did fall, rose gold Aphrodite hearing beauty's call. Ocean foam from violent separation, birthing love's first manifestation. The blade that split eternal, heaven's blood sets time free. Feel the cosmos rising, as the blade let time be. Now the golden age flows from his throne. Time's first rhythm finally shown. Each titan bearing cosmic power as the moments birth each sacred hour. But the blade that splits must also bind as he swallows what time left behind. Every child down his throat descends, fearing how his own story ends. They thought time could contain them in its golden flow, but new powers rising from the depths below. Every moment revolution, every cycle's call. Watch as time's own kingdom soon must also fall. Through the wound that first made time flow, still the ancient powers come and go. We who live in time's swift stream catch glimpses of the timeless dream. Born of violence, nursed on change through cosmic cycles, vast and strange, till Zeus will break time's rigid reign and set the powers in motion again. The blade that split eternity, sacred separate. Heaven's blood sets time free through the darkness. Cosmos ever rising, can't contain it. Through time's mystery, let all be. The womb when heaven's blood did fall, rose gold, Aphrodite beauty's call. While Aphrodite's rose is flower, the womb bleeds almond through every age. As wisdom reads time's sacred page, till all that's bound shall be set free. Beyond time's arming eternity. Now the golden age flows from his throne. Time's first rhythm finally